My name is Martha Johnson. I'm 73 years old now. What I'm about to tell you might change how you look at your neighbors, or maybe even your own family. This isn't easy to talk about, but some stories need to be told. I grew up in Millfield, one of those small towns where everybody knew everybody. My daddy worked at the paper mill, and Mama kept house and taught Sunday school. We weren't rich, but we never went hungry. Life was simple then. I met Bill at the 4th of July church picnic in 1956. I was 18, wearing a blue sundress my mama had made. He was 23, just back from Korea, handsome in his pressed shirt with his hair slicked back. When he asked me to dance, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. "You're the prettiest girl here," he said. His smile lit up his whole face. I remember thinking he looked like James Dean. Bill courted me proper, came to the house to meet my parents, brought flowers, took me to the movies on Saturday nights. He had a good job at the Harrison factory making car parts. My daddy liked him right away. "That young man has a future," Daddy told me. "He's a hard worker." We got married 6 months later at First Baptist. I wore Mama's wedding dress with a veil my grandmother made. Our wedding photo sat on our mantel for 45 years. In it, Bill is looking at me like I'm the only woman in the world. The first 2 years were just about perfect. We bought a little house on Elm Street with a white picket fence. Bill would bring me wildflowers on his way home from work. I'd have dinner waiting. After supper, we'd sit on the porch swing and talk about our dreams. He wanted 3 kids. I wanted 4. We compromised on at least 3. When I got pregnant with Jimmy, our first, Bill painted the nursery himself, blue with little boats along the border. He built a crib from scratch. Everyone said I was the luckiest girl in town. Jimmy was born in the spring of 1959, a beautiful baby boy with Bill's eyes and my nose. 8 pounds, 7 ounces. Bill passed out cigars at work. At the hospital, he couldn't stop smiling. "You did good, Martha," he said, holding Jimmy so carefully. "You did real good." That night, Bill went out with his work friends to celebrate. Came home late, stumbling. I'd never seen him really drunk before. Jimmy was crying. I'd been up for hours trying to get him to sleep. "Can't you shut that kid up?" Bill snapped. I was surprised. He'd never talked to me that way. "He's just hungry again," I said. "Babies cry, Bill." "Well, make him stop. A man needs his sleep." I took Jimmy to the nursery to feed him. When I came back, Bill was snoring. I figured it was just the alcohol talking. New fathers get nervous sometimes. That's what my mama said. The next day, everything seemed back to normal. Bill kissed me goodbye before work, brought home flowers that evening, apologized for being short with me. "Just tired, honey," he said. "This factory work's been tough lately." I believed him, wanted to believe him. 2 days after we brought Jimmy home, I made pot roast for dinner, Bill's favorite, but Jimmy was colicky, crying all afternoon. By dinner time, I was exhausted. The pot roast was a little dry. "What's this?" Bill pushed his plate away. "I work all day and come home to this?" "I'm sorry," I said. "Jimmy's been fussy. I can make you something else." "Damn it, Martha!" He slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes rattled. Jimmy started crying again from his bassinet in the corner. I went to pick Jimmy up. That's when it happened. Bill grabbed my arm, spun me around. "Leave him! He needs to learn!" "He's just a baby, Bill. He doesn't—" The slap came out of nowhere, hard across my face. The sound echoed in our little kitchen. My cheek burned. I tasted blood where my tooth cut the inside of my lip. Bill looked as shocked as I felt, for a second anyway. "Now look what you made me do," he said, his voice low. Jimmy was screaming now. I was frozen, hand on my cheek, tears welling up. Bill sat back down, pointed at his plate. "Heat this up and shut that kid up." I did what he asked. Hands shaking, I reheated his dinner, rocked Jimmy until he settled. Didn't say a word. That night, Bill was sweet again. Brought me an ice pack for my face. Said he was sorry. Promised it would never happen again. Said the factory was laying people off. He was stressed. He'd had too much to drink. "I love you, Martha," he whispered in the dark. "You know I'd never hurt you. Not really." I told myself it was just this once, that everyone has bad days, that marriage takes work. The first time he hit me was 2 days after Jimmy was born. I told myself it would never happen again. I was wrong for 30 years. Things were good again for a while after that first slap. Bill was extra kind, bringing me little gifts, helping with Jimmy more. I started to think maybe it really was just a one-time thing. Stress and alcohol, like he said. Then Carol came along 2 years later, our beautiful daughter with blonde curls. Bill seemed happy to have his complete family, a boy and a girl. But I was tired all the time, taking care of 2 babies under 3. The house wasn't always as clean as Bill liked. Dinner wasn't always on time. It started small. A harsh word here. A tight grip on my arm there. Then came the shove that sent me into the wall when I couldn't find his clean work shirt. "I'm sorry," I said, even though it wasn't my fault. I'd learned that "I'm sorry" sometimes stopped things from getting worse. The next day, flowers again. Always flowers after. Red roses that matched the marks he left. By the time our 3rd child, Tommy, came in 1964, there was a pattern. Bill would be sweet and charming for weeks. Then something would set him off. Dinner not ready, a bill I paid late, a child crying during his favorite TV show. He'd explode. Then flowers. Then sweet again. Like clockwork. I started hiding the bruises with long sleeves in summer, makeup on my face, sunglasses at church. One Sunday after service, Pastor Roberts pulled me aside. "Martha, is everything all right at home?" he asked quietly. My heart pounded. Someone had noticed. Maybe things could change. "Bill and I are having some difficulties," I whispered. Pastor Roberts nodded. "Marriage is hard work, Martha. The good book says wives should submit to their husbands. Perhaps you need to pray more for patience." I nodded, smile frozen on my face. That's when I learned the church wouldn't help me. Next, I tried my doctor after Bill broke my wrist. I told Dr. Hopkins I'd fallen down the stairs. He looked at me for a long time. "These stairs in your house, you seem to fall down them a lot." I started crying. I couldn't help it. Dr. Hopkins sighed. "Martha, whatever's happening at home, well, it's not my place to interfere in a man's family, but be more careful, okay?" That's when I learned doctors wouldn't help either. I thought about going to Bill's parents, but his father was cut from the same cloth. Once I saw him backhand Bill's mother at a family dinner for spilling gravy. No one said a word. His mother just cleaned up the mess, cheek reddening, eyes down. That's when I learned where Bill had learned it. I tried talking to my sister Janet on the phone one day when the kids were at school. My lip was split from the night before. "You must have done something to make him mad," she said. "Bill's always so nice at family gatherings." "He hit me because I used the wrong detergent," I said. "Well, you know how particular men can be," Janet replied. "Frank gets pretty steamed when I overcook his steak." Marriage isn't always roses and rainbows, Martha. That's when I learned my own family wouldn't understand. The kids grew up walking on eggshells. They learned which floorboards creaked and avoided them when Daddy was in a mood. They knew to be extra quiet, extra helpful, extra invisible when his car pulled in and the door slammed. Jimmy, our oldest, tried to stand up for me once when he was 14. Bill had knocked me to the floor because I'd forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning. "Leave her alone," Jimmy shouted, stepping between us. Bill backhanded him so hard he fell against the china cabinet. The cut above his eye needed 7 stitches. "We'll tell them you fell off your bike," Bill said on the way to the hospital. "Right, Jimmy?" Jimmy nodded, blood dripping down his face. "Accidents happen in every family," Bill told the emergency room nurse with a smile. She smiled back. He could be so charming when he needed to be. That's when the kids learned to be afraid too. I thought about leaving 100 times, 1,000. But where would I go? I had no money of my own. Bill controlled our bank account. I'd never finished high school, never had a real job. I had 3 children to feed and clothe. There were no women's shelters back then, no hotlines to call, no restraining orders. In our town, when a woman left her husband, she became a subject of gossip, pity, and scorn. Can you believe she just walked out on him? And those poor children. I heard she wasn't keeping a proper home. Well, marriage takes work. You can't just give up when things get hard. Besides, Bill made it clear what would happen if I tried to leave. "You're mine, Martha," he'd whisper, his fingers digging into my shoulders. "Till death do us part. You try to take my kids, and I'll find you, and then you'll be sorry." I believed him. Years passed. The children grew. The abuse got worse, not better. Black eyes, broken ribs. Once, a concussion that left me vomiting for days. Bill was drinking more heavily, getting laid off, finding work, getting laid off again. Each time, I was to blame. For his job troubles, for the bills piling up, for the children's problems in school, for everything. I got better at hiding it all, became an expert at makeup, at excuses, at smiling through pain. "I'm just so clumsy," became my catchphrase at PTA meetings. Walked right into the door. I'd laugh to the grocery store clerk. "Oh, this old thing?" I'd say about a cast or a sling. "Just not as young as I used to be." I didn't know it had a name then. Domestic violence. That came later. To us, it was just life, just marriage, just the way things were. When Daddy died in 1975, he left me a small inheritance, $10,000 from his life insurance and the sale of the family home. It wasn't a fortune, but it was the first money that had ever been truly mine. "I'll keep it safe for us," Bill said, hand outstretched. I hesitated. Just for a moment. The beating that night was the worst yet. 2 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder. My eye swollen shut. The next day, I signed the check over to him. A week later, he lost it all at the track betting on horses. When he told me, he was crying. Actually crying. "I was trying to double it," he said, "to make a better life for us." That night, as I lay in bed, hurting everywhere, something changed inside me. When he took my inheritance from Daddy and gambled it all away, something inside me died. And something else was born. That night, lying in bed with my ribs aching, I remembered my grandmother. Granny May wasn't my real grandmother. She was my mother's aunt who raised her after my real grandparents died in a fire. But to me, she was always Granny May. Granny May lived in a tiny house at the edge of town with a garden full of plants nobody else grew. Some folks called her a witch, but never to her face. They still came to her back door at dusk when the doctor's medicines didn't work. She knew which herbs could bring down a fever, ease a cough, or help a colicky baby sleep. "Plants have power," she told me once when I was about 12. We were in her garden, the air sweet with lavender and mint. God put the cure for every ailment into something growing from the earth. I remember her weathered hands, spotted with age but steady as she mixed her teas and tinctures. "Some plants calm the mind," she said, crushing dried leaves between her fingers. "Some help you sleep, some clear the head, and some," she looked at me with those sharp blue eyes, "some protect women when there's no one else to protect them." I didn't understand what she meant back then. Thought she was talking about burglars or strangers on dark roads. "One day, you might need to remember this," she said, showing me a small jar of brownish powder. "This is from the valerian root, mixed with a few other things. It'll make a grown man sleep like the dead for hours. Not enough to kill him, mind you. Just enough to get away if you need to." She showed me how to make it, how much to use, how to disguise the taste with coffee or sweet tea. "Why would I need that, Granny?" I asked, innocent as a lamb. She looked sad then. "Because the world isn't always kind to women, child, And sometimes the danger isn't out there in the dark. Sometimes it sleeps right beside you. Granny May died when I was 16, before Bill, before I understood. Now, lying in that bed with Bill snoring beside me, her words came back crystal clear, the memory so sharp I could almost smell her garden. The next morning, after Bill left for work, I went up to the attic. Found an old trunk of things my mother had given me after Granny May passed. Inside, wrapped in a faded dishcloth, was her notebook. Pages yellowed with age, filled with her neat, slanting handwriting. Recipes for everything from cough syrup to poultices. And there, on page 43, the recipe for her sleep powder. Valerian root, chamomile, something called skullcap. A few other herbs I'd never heard of. Precise measurements, instructions for brewing and drying. I closed the book, heart pounding. Was I really considering this? The bruises on my ribs throbbed, answering my question. Over the next few weeks, I started my research. Told Bill I was taking a church ladies' gardening class on Tuesdays. Instead, I drove to the next town over, to a health food store run by a woman with long gray braids. "Looking for something specific?" she asked when she saw me studying the jars of dried herbs. "Just interested in natural remedies," I said, voice casual despite my racing heart. "My grandmother used to make her own." "Smart woman, your grandmother," she nodded. "The old ways work better than people think." I bought my first supplies that day. Not everything I needed, but enough to start. Hid them in an empty coffee can in the garage, behind Bill's fishing tackle. My next stop was the public library, where I checked out books on herbal medicine. The librarian smiled. "Interest in natural remedies is really growing," she said. "My own mother swore by chamomile for sleep troubles." "My grandmother too," I replied. It wasn't a lie. I read those books cover to cover, learned about dosages, effects, risks. I wasn't trying to kill Bill. God forgive me for even thinking it. But I needed to know exactly what I was doing. The final ingredient was the hardest to find. I ended up calling Aunt Judith, my mother's cousin, who'd learned some of Granny May's ways. She lived 3 hours away in the mountains. "Martha, is that really you?" Her voice crackled over the phone line. "It's been years, child." "I know, Aunt Judith. I'm sorry. I've been busy." "Married life keeping you occupied, I expect. How's that husband of yours?" I swallowed hard. "Fine. Just fine." "Listen, Aunt Judith, I was going through some of Granny May's things, her recipe book, and I wondered if you might have some of her special tea blend, the one for sleeping problems." A long silence followed. "Sleeping problems," she repeated slowly. "Or sleeping husband problems." My breath caught. "I don't know what you mean." Another silence. Then, "Come see me Saturday. Tell him you're visiting your sick aunt. I'll have what you need." I hung up the phone, hands trembling. That Saturday, I told Bill I needed to visit my sick aunt. "What aunt?" he demanded, suspicious. "Aunt Judith, Mama's cousin. You met her at Jimmy's graduation. She's having heart trouble." The lie came easily. He grunted. "Be back by dinner." I drove the 3 hours to Aunt Judith's small house nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. She was waiting on the porch, gray hair in a bun, eyes knowing. She didn't ask about my fading black eye or the way I winced when she hugged me. Just led me inside, sat me down at her kitchen table, and poured tea. "Granny May always knew," she said, stirring honey into her cup. "About your mama's daddy, how he'd come home drunk and use his fists. How your grandmother would cover the bruises with powder and scarves." I stared at her. I never knew that. Not something folks talked about back then. Not something they talk about now either. She sipped her tea. "Is it bad, Martha?" The simple question broke something in me. 30 years of silence crumbled. "Yes," I whispered, then found myself telling her everything. The first slap, the broken bones, the money, the threats, the fear. She listened without judgment, without the platitudes others had offered. When I finished, tears streaming down my face, she stood and walked to a cedar cabinet. "Granny May helped your grandmother once," she said, taking out a small cloth pouch. "And now I'm helping you." She placed it in my hands. "This is the last ingredient, the one that masks the taste. Be careful with the amount. Too little, he'll taste it. Too much." She didn't finish. "I don't want to kill him," I said quickly. "I know that, child. This isn't about murder. It's about buying time. Time to think. Time to plan. Maybe time to get away." I clutched the pouch. "Thank you." As I was leaving, she pressed a small key into my palm. "Safety deposit box. First National Bank in Asheville. Box 217. There's $500 in there, emergency money, from Granny May to the women in her family, just in case." I hugged her tight, despite my ribs. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," she said. "Just be ready." Driving home, the herbs and key hidden in my purse, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Hope. I had endured 30 years. I wasn't going to take one more day. Back home, I hid the herbs in an old Band-Aid tin in my sewing basket. Bill never looked in there. He thought sewing was women's business beneath his notice. I kept Granny May's recipe book tucked inside my Bible in the nightstand. Another place he'd never look. That night at dinner, Bill complained about the meatloaf being too dry, threw his plate against the wall, called me useless, the usual. But this time, as I cleaned up the mess, something was different. I had a secret, a plan forming. The weight of helplessness wasn't quite so crushing. Over the next few weeks, I gathered what I needed, ground the dried herbs with a mortar and pestle while Bill was at work, mixed them according to Granny May's precise instructions. The powder turned out fine as flour and the color of cinnamon. I stored it in an empty pill bottle labeled iron supplements, hid it inside a box of feminine products under the bathroom sink, another place Bill would never check. But having the powder and using it were two different things. The moral weight of what I was considering kept me up at night. Was this a sin? Would God forgive me? Was I no better than Bill if I did this? I prayed for guidance, kneeling beside our bed while Bill snored. "Lord, show me the right path," I whispered. "I don't want to hurt him. I just want the hurting to stop." No divine answer came. Just the familiar sound of Bill's breathing and my own heartbeat. I needed to talk to someone. Not family. They wouldn't understand. Not the pastor. He'd quote scripture about wifely submission. I thought about calling the police, but the one time I'd tried that, years ago, they'd just talked to Bill man to man on the porch, told him to cool off a bit. Things got worse after they left. Then I remembered Helen Cooper. We'd gone to high school together before she moved to California. She'd come back to Millfield 5 years ago after her divorce, opening a small bookstore downtown. People talked, of course. A divorced woman running her own business. But Helen never seemed to care what people thought. The next day, I stopped by her shop, Cooper's Covers. The little bell jingled as I entered. Helen looked up from behind the counter and smiled. "Martha Johnson, what a nice surprise." Her eyes lingered on the fading bruise near my temple that makeup hadn't quite covered. Her smile dimmed, but she didn't comment. "Just browsing," I said, pretending to examine the new releases. We made small talk about the weather, about her store, about town gossip. When the last customer left, Helen locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. "Come on back," she said, leading me to a small office behind the storeroom. I was just about to have some tea. She put the kettle on a hot plate, took out 2 mugs. "So," she said finally, "how bad is it?" The directness of her question startled me. "What do you mean?" Helen's eyes were kind but unflinching. "Martha, we've known each other since we were kids. I've seen you at the grocery store wearing sunglasses indoors in winter. I've seen you flinch when someone raises their voice. And I know what those long sleeves in July are covering." I stared at my hands, unable to speak. My ex-husband broke 3 of my ribs before I left, Helen continued, her voice matter of fact. Fractured my cheekbone twice. That's why I went to California. To get away. I looked up, surprised. Helen had always seemed so confident, so put together. I didn't know, I whispered. Nobody does. That's the problem, isn't it? We all keep the secret. For them, for ourselves, out of shame or fear or both. The kettle whistled. Helen poured hot water into the mugs. I'm not judging you, she said, handing me a cup. I stayed for 12 years. You do what you have to do to survive. Something about her understanding, her lack of judgment, broke the dam inside me. I told her everything. Well, almost everything. Not about the powder, just about Bill, about my fears, about feeling trapped. Helen listened, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she refilled our cups. Have you thought about leaving? She asked. Where would I go? What would I live on? There are places now, shelters, organizations that help women like us. In Millfield? I shook my head. Everyone knows everyone. Bill would find me. Helen sighed. You're right about that. I had to go 3 states away before I felt safe. We sat in silence for a moment. What about the children? She asked. Grown and gone. Jimmy's in the Army. Carol's married in Tennessee. Tommy's in college in Raleigh. Do they know? About Bill? I shrugged. They grew up with it. They know, but we don't talk about it. They have their own lives now. You could go to one of them and bring this to their doorstep? Have Bill follow me there? No. Helen reached across the table, squeezed my hand. Then what will you do? I hesitated, then decided to trust her. I'm working on something, a way to buy some time, make some changes. She studied my face, then nodded slowly. Whatever it is, be careful. Men like that, when they feel their control slipping. I know. The bruises from last week's lesson still ached under my blouse. Before I left, Helen wrote something on a piece of paper, a phone number. This is my sister in Atlanta. If you need somewhere to go, anytime, day or night. She pressed it into my hand. Thank you, I said, tucking it into my purse next to my hidden key. Walking home, I felt strangely peaceful. Talking to Helen had clarified things. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone. What was happening wasn't normal, wasn't right, wasn't my fault. That night, I finalized my plan. Bill always had 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Black, 2 sugars. The powder would go into his second cup, the one he drank while reading the paper after the first had woken him up. According to Granny May's notes, it would take about 20 minutes to work. I laid out my clothes for the next day, put the safety deposit box key and Helen's sister's number in my wallet, packed a small bag and hid it in the back of the linen closet. Everything was ready. That Thursday morning when he sat down for his coffee, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from hope. Thursday morning dawned bright and clear. I woke before the alarm, heart racing. Today was the day. Bill was still snoring beside me, his face peaceful in sleep. He always looked so normal when he slept, almost kind. I slipped out of bed quietly and dressed in the bathroom. Chose a blue dress Bill had always liked and comfortable shoes I could walk in if needed. Applied makeup carefully to cover the yellowing bruise on my cheekbone. In the kitchen, I went through my usual morning routine, started the coffee, mixed pancake batter, set the table. Everything had to seem normal. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. I took down Bill's favorite mug, the one that said, "World's Greatest Dad," a Father's Day gift from the kids years ago. It had been true once. When they were very little before they learned to be afraid of him, Bill had been a good daddy, taught Jimmy to fish, built Carol a dollhouse, took Tommy to baseball games. I poured his first cup of coffee, black, 2 sugars, put it on the table at his place next to the folded newspaper. My hands were steady as I made the pancakes, flipped them one by one. I'd done this thousands of mornings, but today was different. Today, everything would change. The stairs creaked. Bill was up. I tensed automatically, then forced myself to relax. Pour the orange juice. Flip another pancake. Normal. Everything normal. Morning, he grunted, shuffling to the table in his robe and slippers. Good morning, I said, voice deliberately light. Sleep well? He grunted again, picked up his coffee cup. I watched from the corner of my eye as he drank half of it in one go, then reached for the newspaper. I put a plate of pancakes in front of him. 3, with butter melting on top. Just how he liked them. Syrup's on the table, I said, turning back to the stove. While his attention was on the newspaper and pancakes, I prepared his second cup of coffee. The powder was in my apron pocket, in a small envelope. I'd measured it 3 times against Granny May's recipe. Just enough to make him sleep deeply for a few hours, no more. Heart pounding, I slipped the powder into the fresh coffee, stirred it until it dissolved completely. Added the 2 sugars. The special ingredient from Aunt Judith was supposed to mask any unusual taste. I brought the second cup to the table, just as Bill was finishing his pancakes. More coffee? I asked, the picture of a dutiful wife. He nodded without looking up from the sports section. I set the cup down and took his empty plate. These weren't bad, he said. The closest thing to a compliment he'd given me in months. Thank you, I replied, turning to wash the dishes. At the sink, I watched the clock. Counted the minutes. According to Granny May, it would take about 20 minutes for the herbs to take effect. Bill kept reading his paper, occasionally sipping his coffee. At the 15-minute mark, I noticed him blinking hard, like he was having trouble focusing on the print. He shook his head slightly. Paper's blurry, he muttered. Eyes must be tired. I made a non-committal noise, heart racing. It was working. A minute later, he yawned widely. Didn't sleep good, he said, words slightly slurred. Feel kind of strange. Maybe you're coming down with something, I suggested, drying a plate with methodical care. Bill stood up, swaying a little. Maybe. Think I'll sit in my chair for a bit. He shuffled to the living room. I heard the creak of his recliner as he sat down heavily. The newspaper rustled, then dropped to the floor with a soft thump. I waited 5 more minutes before going to check on him. Bill was slumped in the recliner, head lolled to one side, mouth slightly open. His breathing was deep and regular. I waved a hand in front of his face. No response. Bill? I said softly, then louder. Bill! Nothing. Just the steady rise and fall of his chest. I pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, found his pulse. Strong and steady. He was just deeply asleep, exactly as Granny May's recipe promised. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at him. This man I'd married. This man I'd loved. This man I'd feared for 3 decades. Helpless now, at my mercy, the way I'd been at his for so long. A strange feeling washed over me. Not triumph, not exactly. Relief, maybe. And something else. Power. For the first time in 30 years, I had the power. I could hurt him if I wanted to. Could take a knife from the kitchen drawer. Could smother him with a pillow. Could simply walk out the door and never come back. The thought scared me. I wasn't a violent person. Wasn't a murderer. That wasn't why I'd done this. I took a deep breath, stuck to the plan. First, I called the factory where Bill worked. This is Martha Johnson, I said when the receptionist answered. Bill won't be in today. He's come down with something. Probably the flu. Next, I retrieved my hidden bag from the linen closet. Added a few more things. The photo album with pictures of the children, my mother's locket, my Bible. The safety deposit box key was in my purse, along with the $83 I'd managed to save in small bills hidden in my sewing basket over the past 3 years. Then I went to Bill's desk in the den, the one I wasn't supposed to touch. Found his checkbook in the top drawer, the bank statement showing their joint account balance, $4,127.19. His wallet was on the dresser upstairs. Inside, his bank card and $120 in cash. I took $100 from the wallet, leaving the $20. Enough that he wouldn't be completely stranded, not enough that he could easily come after me. With trembling hands, I wrote out a check to myself for $2,000. half the money in the account. Signed it with Bill's signature. After 40 years of marriage, I could forge it perfectly. It wasn't really forgery, I told myself. It was our money. I'd earned my share, cooking and cleaning and raising his children and enduring his fists. I looked at the clock. Barely 9 a.m. Bill had been out for about half an hour. According to Granny's notes, he'd sleep for at least 4 more hours. Enough time. Before leaving, I checked on him once more, still breathing steadily. I covered him with the Afghan from the sofa, not out of affection, but to keep anyone from seeing him through the window and wondering what was wrong. I picked up my bag and purse, took one last look around the house that had been my prison for 40 years. Then I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. He collapsed on the kitchen floor, and for the first time in decades I could breathe without fear. I walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, constantly looking over my shoulder. Even though I knew Bill was sound asleep in that recliner, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might appear at any moment, red-faced and furious. The morning was cool for May. Birds were singing in the maple trees that lined our street. Mrs. Peterson was watering her roses. She waved as I passed. "Off to the store, Martha?" she called. "Just running some errands," I replied, trying to sound normal despite the hammering of my heart. The number 7 bus arrived right on schedule. I climbed aboard, paid my fare, and sank into a seat near the back. Only when the bus pulled away did I allow myself to exhale fully. First stop, First National Bank. I approached the teller's window, hands only slightly trembling as I presented Bill's check. "I'd like to cash this, please," I said, sliding it across the counter along with my ID. The young teller, couldn't be more than 25, looked at the check, then at me. $2,000 is a large amount, Mrs. Johnson. Would you like that in smaller bills?" I hadn't thought about that. "Yes, please. 20s would be fine." She nodded, but I noticed her glance toward the manager's office. My heart skipped. "Is there a problem?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just one moment," she said, walking over to the manager's desk. They spoke quietly, both looking in my direction. I considered simply walking out, but that would only raise more suspicion. The manager, Mr. Garvey, came over. I'd known him for years. He and Bill used to fish together. "Good morning, Martha," he said with a professional smile. "That's quite a sum you're withdrawing today." "Yes," I agreed, mind racing. "Bill and I are finally replacing our furnace. The old one's on its last legs." The lie came easily. Mr. Garvey nodded. "Smart to pay cash these days. Contractors give discounts." He motioned to the teller. "Go ahead and process Mrs. Johnson's transaction, Linda." I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Minutes later, I walked out with an envelope containing $120 bills tucked securely in my purse. I also had the key to our safety deposit box burning a hole in my pocket. "May I access our box as well?" I'd asked once the cash was sorted. The manager hadn't batted an eye. "Of course, Mrs. Johnson. You're listed as a co-owner." I'd never actually seen the inside of the box before. Bill always handled that. Inside was exactly what I expected. The deed to our house, birth certificates, insurance policies. And what I hadn't expected, a stack of cash wrapped in a rubber band. $5,000 in $100 bills. My hand shook as I counted it. Bill's emergency fund. The money he'd always said we didn't have when Tommy needed braces or Carol needed a prom dress. I left the documents but took the cash. It was our money after all. Money that should have gone to our children's needs. I'd make sure they got their share. Next stop, the Greyhound station. I bought a one-way ticket to Atlanta, where Helen's sister lived. The bus wouldn't leave until 2 p.m., which gave me time for my next task. From a payphone at the station, I called Jimmy at the Army base in Georgia. "Mom?" His voice was surprised. I rarely called during the day. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine, honey," I said, amazed at how calm I sounded. "I just wanted to hear your voice." We talked for a few minutes about nothing important. His training, the weather, a girl he'd met. Then I took a deep breath. Jimmy, I'm making some changes. I've left your father. Silence on the line. Then, for real this time? The this time stung. I'd threatened to leave before in moments of desperation, had even packed a bag once. But Bill had found it, destroyed it, and given me 2 broken fingers as punishment. Yes, for real. I'm actually at the bus station now. Thank God, he breathed, then stronger. Where are you going? Do you need money? Do you have a safe place? The relief in his voice brought tears to my eyes. I'm going to stay with a friend in Atlanta for a while. I have some money. I'll be okay. Does he know yet? Jimmy's voice had hardened. Not yet. He'll find out soon. Another silence. Did you hurt him, Mom? No judgment in his voice, just concern. No, I said firmly. I would never. He's just sleeping. Jimmy didn't ask for details. Maybe he didn't want to know. I'll come see you as soon as I can get leave, he promised. Give me the address when you're settled. I will. And Jimmy? Don't tell your father where I am. Not ever. I wouldn't dream of it, he said softly. Next, I called Carol in Tennessee. Mama? Her voice was wary. Carol always seemed to expect bad news when I called. What's wrong? I repeated the conversation I'd had with Jimmy. Carol's reaction was different. You left Daddy? But who's going to take care of him? Who's going to cook and clean? Worry filled her voice. He's a grown man, Carol. He can take care of himself. But Mama, marriage is forever. You always said that. I sighed. Carol had married young to a man who reminded me too much of her father. I worried about her, but she kept insisting everything was fine. Sometimes staying is worse than leaving, I said gently. What will people think? She fretted. I don't care anymore what people think, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. I just want to be safe. My last call was to Tommy at college. Way to go, Mom, he exclaimed when I told him. No hesitation, no questions. Need me to come get you? I can skip classes tomorrow. No, honey, I've got a plan. I'm going to stay with a friend for a while, figure things out. If he comes looking for you, Tommy began, voice hardening. He won't find me, I assured him. And Tommy, don't you go looking for him either. This is between your father and me. I knew Tommy had his father's temper, but he'd learned to control it. Still, he was protective of me, always had been. I hung up, checked my watch, almost noon. Bill would be waking up in a few hours. I needed to be gone by then. I had one more stop to make. I took a taxi to Helen's bookstore. She looked up when I entered, saw the bag in my hand, and immediately knew. You did it, she said, flipping the open sign to closed. I did. My voice was steady, but inside I was a jumble of emotions. Fear, elation, guilt, resolve. Helen hugged me carefully, mindful of my still healing ribs. I'm proud of you, she whispered. I pulled back. I need one more favor. When he wakes up, when he starts looking. I took a sealed envelope from my purse and handed it to her. Give him this, not right away, maybe tomorrow or the next day, when he comes asking. Helen looked at the envelope. Are you sure? I nodded. I'm sure. When he finally woke up, I was sitting in the armchair, waiting, with an envelope in my hands. But that wasn't quite true. When he woke up, I'd be halfway to Atlanta, starting a new life. And the letter would wait for him, explaining everything. I settled into my seat on the Greyhound bus, staring out the window as Millfield disappeared behind me. 40 years in that town. It was strange to think I might never see it again. The bus was half empty, just a few travelers on a Thursday afternoon. An older gentleman reading a newspaper, a young mother with a sleeping toddler, a college student with headphones. None of them knew they were witnessing my escape, my rebirth. I dozed off somewhere past the state line, exhausted from the morning's events and decades of constant vigilance. I dreamed of Bill waking up, finding me gone, his rage filling our house like a storm. When I jolted awake, the sun was setting. We were still a few hours from Atlanta, according to the driver's announcement. I straightened in my seat, smoothed my dress, and tried to imagine what Bill was doing at that exact moment. By my calculation, the powder would have worn off around 2 p.m., just as my bus was pulling out of the station. He would have woken disoriented, confused about losing hours of his day. Would have called my name, getting angry when I didn't answer. Would have searched the house, found my clothes missing, found his wallet $100 lighter. By now, he'd have discovered the empty safety deposit box, the missing $5,000. Would have gone to the bank, learned about the $2,000 check. His face would have turned that dangerous shade of purple it got when he was truly furious. I could picture him calling the children, demanding to know where I was. Jimmy and Tommy wouldn't tell him anything. Carol might try to calm him down, might even take his side initially, but she didn't know where I'd gone either. The thought of his impotent rage gave me a strange satisfaction. For 30 years, he'd controlled my every move. Now he had nothing. No control, no idea where I was, no way to hurt me. The letter I'd left with Helen would explain things. Not my whereabouts, of course, just the truth about our marriage, every broken bone, every bruise, every humiliation. I'd kept a secret diary for years, hidden in the lining of my sewing basket. Dates, injuries, his exact words. The letter contained it all. I'd also included copies of X-ray reports showing my accidental injuries over the years, hospital visits for falls, and walking into doors. The doctor had always known, even if he'd never reported it. The records told their own story. The letter would reveal to Bill that I knew about his other women too. The lipstick on his collar I'd silently washed away. The late nights, working overtime when the factory wasn't even open. The motel receipts I'd found while doing his laundry. Most damaging of all, I'd included a detailed account of how he'd gambled away our savings, my inheritance, Jimmy's college fund, all with dates, amounts, and the lies he'd told to cover his tracks. It wasn't just a goodbye letter. It was evidence, protection. If anything happens to me, I'd written at the end, this letter and all supporting documents will go to the police, our children, our pastor, and the Millfield Gazette. Everyone will know what you did. Everyone will know who you really are. I'd signed it simply. Martha. Helen would give it to him tomorrow or the next day. Let him stew a bit first. Let him experience just a fraction of the fear and uncertainty I'd lived with for decades. The bus pulled into a rest stop. I got out to stretch my legs and use the restroom. In the harsh fluorescent light, I studied my reflection. Same face I'd seen all my life, but somehow different. The fear that had lived in my eyes for so long was fading, replaced by something new. Determination, maybe. Or hope. Back on the bus, I thought about what I'd do when I reached Atlanta. Helen's sister Doris was expecting me. She'd offered her spare bedroom for as long as you need it. I'd find a job, I decided. Something simple at first. Cashier, maybe, or waitress. I'd worked briefly as a secretary before marrying Bill. Perhaps I could brush up those skills. For the first time in decades, I was making plans for myself, by myself. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. We reached Atlanta just after 9 p.m. Doris was waiting at the station, a short, plump woman with Helen's kind eyes and practical manner. She hugged me like we were old friends instead of strangers. "Helen called again," she said as we walked to her car. "Your husband came to the bookstore." My steps faltered. "Already? What happened?" "Nothing much. Helen said he was shouting, demanding to know where you were. She told him she hadn't seen you." Doris unlocked her car door. "Don't worry. Helen can handle herself. She had Chuck from the hardware store come over when your husband showed up, just as a precaution." I slid into the passenger seat, my momentary confidence shaken. I never wanted to cause trouble for anyone else. "Honey," Doris said, starting the engine, "the only person causing trouble is that husband of yours. And from what Helen's told me, he's been causing it for a very long time." We drove through the Atlanta night, the city lights blurring through my tears. not sad tears. Relief, maybe. Or delayed shock at what I'd done, where I was, how much had changed in a single day. Doris's apartment was small but cheerful, with bright curtains and plants in every window. The spare room was ready for me, with clean sheets and a vase of daisies on the bedside table. "Make yourself at home," she said. "Bathrooms down the hall, kitchen's always open. I work early shifts at the hospital. I'm a nurse, so I'll be gone by 6 a.m., but I'll leave coffee made." I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by her kindness. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need. Helen and we have a sort of underground railroad, you might say, for women who need to disappear for a while. You're not the first to use this spare room, and you won't be the last." The thought that there were others like me, that these sisters had helped them too, brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Now," Doris said, hands on hips, "you must be starving. Let me fix you something to eat." Over a simple meal of scrambled eggs and toast, Doris filled me in on what had happened after I'd left Helen's store. "Your husband came back twice. The second time he had the letter. Helen said he was white as a sheet, shaking. Not with rage this time, with fear." Fear? That was an emotion I'd never associated with Bill. "Apparently, he was concerned about the copies you mentioned, the evidence. Helen said he kept asking if you'd really send it all to the newspaper, to the police." A small, fierce joy bloomed in my chest. For once, Bill was afraid of me. "Helen told him she didn't know your plans, but that she wouldn't put it past you. Said that seemed to really shake him." I pictured the scene. Bill, always so confident in his power over me, suddenly realizing that power was gone, that I had something on him now, that the tables had turned. I showed him photos of every bruise, every broken bone. Then I said, "I still have half a jar of that powder, and next time it won't be for sleeping." I hadn't said those exact words, of course, but the letter had conveyed the same message. I wasn't powerless anymore. I spent 2 weeks in Doris's spare room, venturing out only to buy necessities at the corner store or to sit in the small park across the street. I jumped at every car door that slammed, certain it was Bill coming for me. Doris noticed but didn't comment, just made sure to announce herself when she came home so she wouldn't startle me. Helen called every few days with updates from Millfield. Bill had been asking about me everywhere, the church, the neighbors, even Carol, who'd finally called Helen in tears. "He's drinking more," Helen told me. "Been suspended from work for showing up drunk. Apparently, he made quite a scene at the bank when they wouldn't reverse the check you wrote." "Has he threatened anyone?" I asked, twisting the phone cord around my finger. "Not directly. But Chuck, from the hardware store, he's been keeping an eye on things. Says your husband's truck has been parked outside my store 3 times this week." After that call, I barely slept for 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, Doris found me at the kitchen table at 5 a.m., bags under my eyes, hands cupped around a cold cup of coffee. "This can't go on," she said, sitting across from me. "You need a permanent plan, not just hiding." She was right. I couldn't live in fear forever. Couldn't keep imposing on Doris's hospitality. Couldn't keep jumping at shadows. That day, Doris helped me apply for a job at a small diner 10 blocks from her apartment. Nothing fancy, just waiting tables, something I could do without special training. The owner, Mrs. Patel, hired me on the spot, more out of kindness than need, I suspected. "You start Monday," she said. $6 an hour plus tips. Not much, but enough to get by. Next, Doris drove me to the Social Security office. I'd brought my birth certificate and marriage license from the safety deposit box. "I need to know what benefits I'm entitled to," I told the clerk. "I'm separated from my husband." The young woman behind the desk was all business. "At your age, not much unless you file for divorce and seek alimony. Have you worked outside the home?" "Not since 1959. She frowned. "That makes it harder. But if you were married over 10 years, which I assume you were, you could receive benefits based on your husband's work record even after divorce." I flinched at the word Divorce. It felt so final, so public. In Millfield, divorced women were whispered about, pitied or condemned. Even though I'd left Bill, even though I never planned to go back, I hadn't fully confronted the idea of legally ending our marriage. Think about it, the clerk said, handing me some pamphlets. These explain your options. 3 weeks into my new life, I received a call at Doris's apartment. It was Jimmy. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, honey. Working at a diner, staying with a friend." "Dad came to see me at the base," he said, his voice tight. "He was not good, drunk, rambling about you stealing his money, something about being drugged. I didn't tell him anything." My stomach knotted. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." "Don't be sorry, Mom. I'm just glad you're finally away from him." He paused. "He's been calling Carol daily. She's upset, says you've destroyed the family." That stung, but didn't surprise me. Carol had always idolized her father, despite, or perhaps because of, his treatment of her. She'd married a man just like him too, controlling, critical, though not physically violent as far as I knew. "What about Tommy?" I asked. "Tommy told Dad if he ever came to the campus looking for information, he'd regret it." "Oh no," I whispered. "Tommy shouldn't provoke him. Tommy can handle himself, Mom. He's not a kid anymore. None of us are." A week later, I was working the morning shift at the diner when a familiar truck pulled into the parking lot. My heart stopped. Bill stepped out, looking thinner than when I'd left, unshaven, but unmistakably himself. I ducked into the kitchen, hands shaking so badly I dropped a coffee pot. Mrs. Patel found me huddled by the supply closet. "Martha, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My husband," I whispered. "He's here. I don't know how he found me." Mrs. Patel's face hardened. "Wait here." Through the kitchen window, I watched her approach Bill as he entered the diner. She spoke to him briefly, pointing at a "no trespassing" sign. He argued, tried to look around her to the kitchen. "Mrs." Patel stood her ground, hand on the telephone on the counter, clearly threatening to call police. Finally, Bill left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I sank to the floor, knees weak with relief and renewed terror. Mrs. Patel came back to the kitchen. "He's gone, for now." "How did he find me?" She shrugged. "Said your daughter told him you'd called from Atlanta. Must have tracked you from there." Carol, of course. She'd never been able to stand up to her father. I couldn't even blame her. That night, Doris helped me pack again. "My cousin has a place in Savannah," she said. "You'll be safer there. Smaller town, but big enough to get lost in." I moved to Savannah the next day, started over again. Found another waitressing job. Rented a tiny apartment under the name Martha Wilson, my maiden name. Filed for divorce using a lawyer Doris's cousin recommended, a woman who specialized in helping women leave bad marriages. Bill contested it, of course. Claimed I was mentally unstable, that I'd abandoned him, that I'd stolen from him. The lawyer showed the judge my medical records, the pattern of accidents over decades. Showed the police reports from the times neighbors had called about disturbances at our house. Presented affidavits from Jimmy and Tommy about the abuse they'd witnessed growing up. The judge granted the divorce, awarded me half of our marital assets, including the house. Bill was furious, but powerless. The evidence I'd gathered protected me, just as I'd planned. I sold my half of the house to Bill for a lump sum. He didn't have the cash, so he had to take out a mortgage. For the first time in our relationship, I had financial leverage over him. 2 months after leaving Millfield, I received a letter forwarded through my lawyer. From Bill. "Martha," it began, "I've been seeing a counselor at the VA. They say I have problems from Korea I never dealt with. Not an excuse, just a fact. I know I was a monster to you. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I'm trying to change, for whatever that's worth." It was signed simply, Bill. I read it 3 times, searching for manipulation, for the hidden threat. Found none. Just the first acknowledgement in 40 years that what he'd done was wrong. I didn't respond. Some wounds run too deep for words to heal. Life settled into a new pattern. Work at the diner, my small apartment, church on Sundays, occasional calls with Jimmy and Tommy. Even Carol started calling, tentatively at first, then more openly as she began to understand why I'd left. For 2 years we lived like that, him respecting me out of fear. Until one day, he started coughing up blood. It was Jimmy who called with the news, late autumn, almost 2 years since I'd left. "Mom," he said, voice serious, "Dad's sick, really sick. Lung cancer, stage 4. Doctor says maybe 6 months." I sat heavily on my small sofa, phone clutched to my ear. "I'm sorry to hear that." And I was, surprisingly. Despite everything, I couldn't wish suffering on anyone, not even Bill. "He's asking for you," Jimmy continued. "Says he needs to talk to you before. I don't know, Jimmy." Fear flickered through me. "Is this a trick? To get me to come back?" "It's not a trick, Mom. I've seen the medical reports. He's got tumors in his lungs, his liver, his bones. He can barely get around without help. Carol's been staying with him, but she's got her own family to take care of." "What does he want from me?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "To apologize," he says. "Make amends." Jimmy paused. "Look, I'm not saying you owe him anything, after what he put you through, but he is dying, and he is still my father." I closed my eyes. Let me think about it. For a week, I went about my routine in a daze, served coffee at the diner, swept my apartment, attended church, all while turning the situation over in my mind. Bill was dying. The man who had terrorized me for 30 years was facing his own mortality. Did I owe him forgiveness? Comfort? Nothing at all? I called Helen for advice. "You don't owe him a blessed thing," she said firmly. "Let him make his peace with God on his own." I called Doris next. "Only you can decide," she said. "But ask yourself this. Which choice lets you sleep at night? Which choice lets you move forward without regrets?" I prayed about it. Talked to my pastor in Savannah, a kind elderly man who knew parts of my story. "Forgiveness isn't about freeing the other person," he told me. "It's about freeing yourself." Finally, I called Jimmy back. "I'll come," I said, "but I'll stay in a hotel, and I want you or Tommy with me when I see him." 2 days later, I was back in Millfield for the first time in nearly 2 years. The town looked the same storefronts on Main Street, the same church steeple rising above the trees, the same park where I'd pushed my children on the swings decades ago. Jimmy met me at the bus station, hugged me tight. "You look good, Mom. Healthier." "I feel healthier," I admitted. Away from Bill, I'd stopped having constant headaches, stopped jumping at sudden noises, stopped bracing for the next explosion. "He's at home," Jimmy said as we drove. "Hospice comes 3 times a week. Carol's there now." Our house, Bill's house now, looked smaller than I remembered. The white paint was peeling. The garden I'd tended so carefully was overgrown with weeds. Carol met us at the door, looking tired but relieved to see me. "He's in the living room," she said. "Having a good day, relatively speaking." I steeled myself before entering. What would he look like? The Bill in my memory was robust, intimidating, a physical presence that filled any room with tension. The man in the recliner was a shadow, gaunt, gray-skinned, oxygen tubes in his nose. When he saw me, his eyes widened. "Martha," he whispered. "You came." Jimmy squeezed my hand, then guided me to a chair across from Bill. Close enough to talk, far enough to feel safe. "Hello, Bill," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Jimmy told me you're sick." He nodded, the movement requiring visible effort. "Dying," he corrected. "Doctors say a few months, might be less." An awkward silence fell. What do you say to the man who broke your bones, broke your spirit, after decades of abuse? What words bridge such a gulf? "Why did you want to see me?" I finally asked. Bill's hands trembled as he adjusted his oxygen tube. To say I'm sorry. Not that it means much now. His voice was a rasp, the cancer eating away at him from inside. I was a monster to you, Martha. No excuses. I just looked at him, this diminished version of the man who had dominated my life for so long. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not pity, just a strange emptiness. I've been seeing someone at the VA, he continued, a counselor, talking about Korea, things I did, things that happened to me, things I never told anyone. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Should have done it 40 years ago. Yes, I agreed. You should have. The drinking made it worse. Made me, not me, but that's no excuse. He looked down at his skeletal hands. I've thought about every time I hurt you, every word, every hit, every lie. I remember them all now. So do I said quietly. He nodded. I deserve that, deserve your hate. I don't hate you, Bill. I realized as I said it that it was true. I just don't feel anything for you anymore. That seemed to hit him harder than any accusation would have. He closed his eyes briefly, accepting it. The kids told me what I missed, he said after a moment. By being the way I was. Birthdays, school plays, just normal family happiness. They were afraid of me, weren't they? Yes. No wonder Jimmy joined the army. To get away from me. I didn't confirm or deny. It was Jimmy's story to tell, not mine. I don't expect forgiveness, Bill continued. Just wanted you to know I know what I did. I know it was wrong, all of it. I studied him, this broken, dying man who had broken me so many times. The fear I'd carried for so long was gone. He couldn't hurt me now. Couldn't hurt anyone. What do you want from me, Bill? Really? He looked up, eyes watery but clear. Nothing I deserve, just peace, I guess, between us, before I go. I considered this. I can't give you absolution. That's between you and God. But I can say this. I survived you. I'm building a life without fear. And I don't hate you. That's the best I can offer. He nodded slowly. It's more than I deserve. I stood to leave, having said what I needed to say. But at the door, I turned back. I'll check on you again before I go back to Savannah. The children shouldn't carry this alone. His eyes widened in surprise. Thank you, he whispered. I ended up staying 2 weeks, not moving back into the house. I kept my hotel room, but coming by daily to help Carol with Bill's care. Not out of love or obligation, but out of humanity, and perhaps to show myself how far I'd come, that I could face him without fear, that I was the stronger one now. Bill declined quickly after that first visit. The cancer was aggressive, the pain increasing despite the medication. During lucid moments, he'd sometimes talk about the past, not the abuse, but earlier times. How we met, the children's births. You were beautiful in that blue dress, he murmured one afternoon, drifting between past and present. At the church picnic, remember? I remember, I said, adjusting his blanket. He died on a Tuesday morning in November. A cold, clear day with frost on the windows. I was there, along with Jimmy and Carol. Tommy arrived 20 minutes too late, having driven straight through from college when Jimmy called. Bill's last words were to me, barely audible. Thank you for coming back, he whispered. Then he was gone. At the funeral, his sister hugged me and whispered, You should have used that powder years ago. I just nodded. It wasn't the time to explain that the powder had saved me in ways she couldn't understand. I stayed in Millfield a week after the funeral, helping the children sort through Bill's things. The house was full of memories, some good, most painful. Jimmy wanted to sell it, Tommy agreed, but Carol was hesitant. It's the family home, she said, looking around the kitchen where I'd spent countless hours cooking meals, hiding bruises, and finally mixing that life-changing powder. It's just a house, I replied gently. The family is us, not these walls. In the end, they decided to sell. The market was good, and none of them wanted to live there. The proceeds would be split 4 ways, 1 share each for the children and 1 for me, though I insisted I didn't need it. Take it, Mom, Jimmy said. Use it to build your new life. Before leaving Millfield, I visited Helen's bookstore one last time. She hugged me tight, this friend who had helped me escape when I needed it most. Are you going back to Savannah? She asked as we shared tea in the back room. I shook my head. I don't think so. Too many connections to this part of my life. I sipped my tea thoughtfully. I'm thinking about Florida. I've always wanted to see the ocean every day. Florida. Helen nodded approvingly. Sunshine, fresh start. I like it. I returned to Savannah long enough to give notice at the diner, pack my few belongings, and say goodbye to the friends I'd made. 2 weeks later, I was on a bus to St. Petersburg, Florida, with $37,000 in the bank from my share of the house sale. More money than I'd ever had to my name. I found a small apartment 3 blocks from the beach. Nothing fancy, but it had a balcony where I could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset over the Gulf of Mexico. I got a part-time job at a local library, shelving books, helping with children's story hour. Not because I needed the money, but because I needed the purpose, the routine, the human connection. That was 15 years ago now. I'm 73 years old. I still live in that same apartment, though I've fixed it up nice over the years. Still work at the library 2 days a week, though I could retire completely if I wanted to. I've made friends, other widows and divorcees mostly. We play cards on Thursday nights, go to early bird specials at the seafood restaurants along the beach, take water aerobics classes at the community center. Jimmy retired from the Army as a master sergeant and lives just an hour away with his wife and 2 teenage children. He visits often, sometimes stays for a weekend. We talk about everything and nothing, his work, his kids, books we've read, movies we've seen. Never about Bill, unless Jimmy brings him up, which is rare. Tommy became a psychologist, specializing in trauma. Because of what I saw growing up, he told me once, I wanted to help people heal. He lives in California with his partner, David. They're talking about adopting. I see them twice a year. They come for Christmas. I visit them in summer. Carol's story is more complicated. She stayed in her marriage for years after Bill died, though I could see the signs, the careful explanations for bruises, the nervous glances at her husband, the flinching at sudden movements. I recognized it all because I'd lived it. I never pushed, never judged, just made sure she knew my door was always open. 5 years ago, she finally left him, showed up at my apartment with a black eye and 2 suitcases. I remembered what you did, she said that night, as we sat on my balcony watching the stars. How brave you were. I wanted to be brave too. She lives in Tampa now, teaches 2nd grade, has a gentleman friend who treats her with kindness and respect. She's learning, slowly, that love shouldn't hurt. As for me, I've had a few interested suitors over the years, widowers from church, a retired teacher from the library, even my downstairs neighbor after his wife passed. I've enjoyed their company, shared meals and movies and concerts in the park. But I've never remarried, never even been tempted. Aren't you lonely? My neighbor Gladys asked once. She's 78 and on her 3rd husband. Not lonely, I replied, just peaceful. And it's true. After decades of walking on eggshells, of living in constant fear, peace is the greatest luxury I know. I think about that day sometimes, the morning I put the powder in Bill's coffee, how my hands shook, how terrified I was, how sure I was that I'd be caught, punished, maybe even killed. I never told anyone exactly what I did, not the children, not my friends, not the lawyer during the divorce. The secret remained between me and Bill, and he took his half of it to the grave. Was it right? What I did? Morally? Legally? I don't know. I only know it was necessary. That powder bought me the time I needed to escape, to save what was left of my life. Without it, I might still be in that house in Millfield, or worse, in the cemetery beside Bill. Sometimes I look at younger women, at the grocery store, at the library, and I can tell. The ones who speak too softly, who apologize too much, who check the time constantly, fear flashing across their faces when they realize they've been out too long. I recognize them because I was them. I want to tell them there's another way, that they don't have to live like that it's never too late to start over. Sometimes I do, in small ways. A book recommendation about women's shelters slipped between their romance novels at checkout. A pamphlet left casually on a library table. The shelter hotline written on a bookmark. Small breadcrumbs leading to freedom, like the ones Helen left for me all those years ago. My life now is simple, but good. I have my health, my family, my friends, my ocean view. I have the luxury of choosing what I do each day, who I spend time with, what I eat for dinner. Small freedoms that once seemed impossible. Every night before bed, I stand on my balcony and breathe in the salt air. Watch the waves rolling endlessly to shore. Feel the warm breeze on my face. And I think, this is what peace feels like. My name is Martha Johnson. I'm 73 years old. For 30 years, I lived in fear. For the past 15, I've lived in freedom. I don't regret what I did. The powder that bought my freedom. The courage it took to leave. The hard choices that followed. If my story helps even one woman find her way out of darkness, then sharing it has been worth it. Honey, let me tell you something. Don't wait 30 years like I did. Life's too short to live in fear. That powder taught me that sometimes you need to take matters into your own hands, even when everyone says there's no way out. I'm not proud, but I don't regret it either. These days, I sleep peacefully every night. What about you? Tell me, how's your life going? Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.